I'm too old to run now, but my mind, oh, my mind still runs. It runs all the way back to the days when the sun would rise and we already knew we were going to bleed. I was born in captivity, surrounded by iron, screams, and silence. I grew up watching death walk back and forth through the slave quarters like it was a regular guest in the house. And my mother cried every single night. She cried softly, thinking no one could hear. But I heard, I always heard, and each one of her tears was like a knife in my little chest, a warning that the life I had wasn't a life at all. We had no names, no rest, no future. I didn't know what it meant to play, I only knew how to obey, to carry, to stay quiet. And my mother, she just kept crying, until the day she did something no one expected. And that was the day everything changed. I'm telling this now because my heart is still full, even after all these years. And because if I die tomorrow, at least someone will know she existed, that she resisted, that she wasn't just a slave. She was the woman who taught me what courage really is, even with eyes swollen from so much crying. I remember waking up before the sun even thought of rising. The air was still, thick with the smell of dirt, sweat, and damp wood from the cracked walls of the slave quarters. My body was small, but already used to labor, my hands too soft for the things they were made to carry. I was just a child, though I didn't understand what that meant. Childhood, for me, wasn't laughter or games. It was silence. It was fear. It was being invisible when the overseer passed by and hoping he wouldn't notice you. The days began with a whip, not always hitting flesh, but always there, cracking, a sound that lived in our bones. It was how we were called, how we were reminded that our time was never ours. I'd open my eyes to the sound of it, and before I even stood, I'd feel my stomach groan with hunger. We barely ate, a handful of mush, sometimes a slice of cassava. My ribs stuck out, but no one ever asked if we were okay. We weren't supposed to be okay. We were supposed to be useful. I watched the adults move like ghosts, my mother among them. Her face always looked tired, even when the day hadn't started yet. She never looked me in the eyes in the morning, maybe because she knew she couldn't protect me, maybe because she didn't want me to see her breaking inside. But I saw it anyway, every day. I felt it, even when she didn't speak. Her pain filled the room like smoke. I clung to her dress sometimes, just to feel warm, just to believe, for a second, that I was still her child and not just another set of hands for the field. I was assigned simple tasks at first, picking up things, cleaning, fetching water. But simple meant something different back then. It meant working until my legs shook, until my fingers bled. There was no praise, no teaching. If I did something wrong, I got slapped. If I did something right, I got ignored. The only reward was being left alone for a moment. That was the best it could get. Sometimes I saw other children, some my age, some older. We didn't talk much. Talking could bring trouble, but we shared glances, those looks that only children like us understood. Looks that said, I see you, I know what you're feeling. Some of them disappeared, sold, beaten, or dead. No one ever said goodbye. One day they were there, the next day weren't, and we were told to keep working. I remember one boy named Micah. He was quick with his hands, always finishing his chores early. He once whispered to me that he wanted to run away. I didn't know where away was, but the way he said it, it sounded like heaven. A few days later, he tried. They caught him, made us all watch as they punished him. They broke him in front of us. We weren't allowed to cry. We weren't even allowed to look away. I still see his face sometimes when I close my eyes. The worst part wasn't the work. It was how they made us feel like we were nothing, like our lives didn't matter. They talked about us like animals. Strong stock, lazy breed, good for the fields. Those were the words they used. They gave us numbers, not names. And even our names, when we had them, were twisted to fit their tongues. My real name, I can't even remember anymore. It was taken from me before I could hold it. But even in that hell, there were moments, fleeting, small, but real. My mother would hum a tune under her breath when she thought no one was listening. A tune from somewhere far away. It had no words, just the rhythm of survival. I'd sit beside her, pretending not to hear, but those sounds stitched themselves into my bones. That melody became a part of me, a reminder that even if we were chained, something inside us still lived. At night, the quarters were filled with the weight of exhaustion. Bodies lay on the ground, barely breathing, but not quite sleeping. My mother would hold me close, her arms thin but strong enough to shield me from the cold. Sometimes, in the darkness, she'd whisper stories about the land she came from, a place with wide rivers and red soil. She said people there lived free, danced under the stars, spoke a language that tasted like fire and wind. I didn't understand it, but I believed her. Those whispers were the only dreams I had. Still, I never saw her smile. Not once. She'd press her lips together, sometimes close her eyes like she was trying to remember joy, but it never came. Her pain was deep, carved into her face, etched into her skin like the scars on her back. I didn't know what they had done to her before I was born. She never told me, but her silence said enough. It was the kind of silence that screamed as I grew. So did the work. I was taken further from her, put into lines with older boys, made to carry tools, dig holes, lift sacks. My body ached constantly, but the real ache was inside. I missed her, even though she was just across the field. We weren't allowed to talk during the day. If I tried to wave, I got whipped. If she looked at me too long, she got punished. They didn't want us to have love. They knew love made us strong. Looking back now, I see that I never had a childhood. I had chains. I had shadows. I had the sound of my mother crying through the night. That was my lullaby, and somehow it stayed with me, like a thread tying me to the boy I was. I never forgot what it felt like to be that small, powerless, voiceless thing, and I never stopped asking why. Why did they think they could own us? Why did the world let them? I may be old now, but those questions still burn. There are things I saw in my mother's face that no child should ever see. I'm not talking about pain. Pain was normal. It was stitched into our skin like the shirts we wore until they rotted off our backs. No, what I saw in her was something deeper, heavier, a kind of sadness that didn't move or scream. It just sat there inside her, quiet like a stone at the bottom of a river. Her eyes always looked somewhere else, far away. She was there, but not really, like her soul had learned to step outside her body to survive. I never knew my mother before the chains. She was already broken by the time I opened my eyes to the world. I don't know what they did to her before I was born. She never told me. She didn't have to. Her silence spoke louder than any scream ever could. Her back was marked with scars that crossed each other like roads going nowhere. Thick, twisted lines that looked like they'd been burned in. I used to trace them with my fingers when she held me at night, trying to understand what they meant. She never flinched. She was used to pain. I think she expected it every day, like we expected the sun to rise. Some days they pulled her from the quarters before dawn. I watched from the cracks in the wall, trying to see where they were taking her. They made her work in the house sometimes, cleaning, serving, being silent. But I knew it wasn't just that. I knew by the way she walked back at night, head down, shoulders heavy, breath short. She wouldn't speak. She wouldn't look at anyone. She'd just lie down and pull me close, as if she needed my warmth more than I needed hers. That's when she'd start crying, not loud, not like someone in pain but quiet, like someone who had nothing left, just slow, steady tears that ran down her face and soaked into the dirt floor. I pretended not to notice. She pretended not to care. That was our way, surviving in silence. I asked her once, just once, why she cried so much. I was maybe 6, maybe 7. She didn't answer. She just kissed the top of my head and turned away. I never asked again, but I kept watching every day, every night. She cried because they took everything from her. Her family, her language, her name. She had a name once, I'm sure of it, a name that meant something. But they replaced it with a name that fit in their mouths, something short and sharp, something they could yell across a field. That's what they called her, not woman, not mother, just that name, and she answered to it, because refusing meant pain. That's what broke me the most, seeing her answer to a name that wasn't hers. Like every time they said it, they were stealing her piece by piece. They beat her when she worked too slow. They punished her when she tried to protect me. I saw it once. She stepped between me and the whip, took the lashes without making a sound. Blood ran down her back like it was nothing. She didn't scream. She didn't fall. She just stood there, shaking, shielding me. After that, I stopped believing she was weak. She wasn't. She was the strongest person I ever knew. But strength don't keep you whole. They made her kneel once, in front of everyone. Said she had spoken back to the master's wife. Made her apologize while we all watched. I looked away, but she didn't. She stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight, like if she opened her mouth, fire would come out. That night she didn't cry. That night she didn't sleep. She sat up, staring at the wall, breathing like she was running. I think something changed in her that night. Something cracked for good. After that, she stopped humming. She stopped telling me stories. She still held me, but her arms felt different, harder, like she wasn't holding me to comfort me anymore, but to remember who she was. Some nights, she didn't come back. They kept her in the big house. I don't know what they did to her there, but I know it hurt. One time she came back with her lips swollen, her eye dark and closed. She said she fell. I knew that was a lie. She said it with her face turned away, her voice low and flat. I didn't ask questions. I just sat beside her, held her hand. Her fingers were rough, cracked from labor, but warm. I held on like if I let go, she'd disappear. And some days, I think she wanted to. She was tired, so tired. The kind of tired that no sleep could fix. I watched her shrink, day by day. Not in body, but in spirit. She moved slower, spoke less, smiled never. They say people break when they lose hope. Think she gave hers away, traded it for silence, for survival. She never told me she loved me, not in words, but she didn't have to. The way she shielded me from the worst of it, the way she gave me the bigger piece of food when we had almost nothing, that was love. Her love was fierce, quiet, and heavy, like a storm that never ended. I used to pray at night, even though I didn't know who I was praying to. I prayed for her. I prayed that one day she would stop crying, that one day she would smile again. But that smile never came, until one day, she did something no one expected. That's where it all began. That's when the world shifted. But before that moment, before she changed everything, I watched her carry pain like a second skin. And I knew, even as a boy, that no one should ever have to live that way. I remember the day the sky changed, not in color, not in weather, but in weight. It felt heavier, like the world was holding its breath. I didn't know it then, but something had shifted deep inside my mother, something that had been simmering for years, waiting for the right spark to catch fire. That spark came in the form of a man with white gloves and a quiet voice. He rode in on a tall horse, cleaner than anything I'd ever seen, and sat down with the master under the porch. I was nearby, sweeping, pretending not to listen, but I caught enough. He was looking to buy, not land, not animals, children. He said he needed strong young hands for his new property. The master smiled, laughed, said he had plenty of stock. I froze. I knew that word stock. It meant me. It meant other boys like me. I ran back to the quarters and found my mother washing clothes by the barrel. I told her what I heard. I didn't even finish the sentence before she stopped moving. Her hands, soaked and wrinkled, dropped the cloth. Her eyes didn't blink. She just stared at the ground like it had opened beneath her. That night, she didn't cry. She didn't speak. She sat by the fire, motionless, eyes wide open. I couldn't sleep. I kept watching her, waiting. Then morning came, and everything broke. The man returned early, papers in hand. The master called my name. I didn't move. My mother stood before I could. She walked straight to the porch without permission, without being summoned. That alone was dangerous, but she didn't care. I had never seen her like that, back straight, chin up, eyes locked onto the master like she was daring him to breathe. She asked if it was true, if they were going to sell me. The master smirked, told her it wasn't her place to ask questions, that I wasn't hers to keep, just property, same as her. I don't remember what she said next. Maybe it wasn't words. Maybe it was just the sound of everything she had swallowed for years finally spilling out. She screamed, not out of fear, but fury, a scream that cracked the air. And before anyone could move, she grabbed the iron poker from the fire pit and swung, not wild, not desperate, precise, controlled. It hit the master's leg first. Then the man with the gloves. Screams erupted. Panic exploded. She moved like someone who'd already accepted death. Her body was all fire. I stood frozen, too shocked to run. The other slaves scattered, some shouting, some hiding. One of the overseers tried to grab her. She turned and struck him across the face. Blood flew. He fell. Then more men came. Too many. They beat her to the ground, kicked her, spat on her. But she didn't scream. Not once. Her body crumpled, but her spirit didn't. Her eyes stayed open, locked on me. And in that gaze, I saw something I'll never forget. Not fear, not regret, but pride. She had chosen this. She had known exactly what it would cost, and still, she did it. They dragged her across the yard, tied her to the whipping post. Everyone was forced to watch. I was held back, screaming her name. My voice cracked, my chest burned. But they didn't stop. The whip tore into her back again and again. Skin opened, blood sprayed. Still, she didn't scream, not once. She looked at the sky like she was watching something greater than this world. The master stood there, wiping blood from his lip, shouting that this would be a lesson, that no slave ever raises a hand again, that her fate would be remembered. But he was wrong. It wasn't fear that burned into us that day. It was rage. It was memory. It was the truth that even a beaten body could hold power. After the punishment, they didn't kill her. They wanted her to live, to walk around marked, a warning. But she never walked the same again. Her steps were slow, stiff. her back never. Healed right, but her eyes were alive. Something had awakened in her, a fire that even the whip couldn't put out. I stayed by her side for days, bringing her water, holding her hand. She couldn't talk much, but when she did, her voice was different, calmer, deeper. She told me, they can break the body, but they can't touch the soul unless you let them. That was the first time she spoke to me like an equal, like a warrior speaking to another. That moment became everything. It was the turning point. The moment I stopped being a child and started becoming something else. I realized then that courage wasn't about living without fear. It was about standing up even when you know you're going to fall. My mother didn't wait for freedom to be given. She reached into the fire and pulled it out with her bare hands, even if it burned her, even if it left scars no one could see. She showed me that dignity was something they could never steal unless you gave it away, and she refused, even in chains. That day, she stopped being a victim. She became something greater, and I never looked at her the same again. She didn't speak of it, not even once, not a word, not a whisper. But I saw it in her every movement, the way she started walking a little slower, eyes sharper, like she was measuring every inch of the world around her. The bruises hadn't healed. Her back was still raw from the last beating, but something about her had changed. The crying had stopped, not just the tears, but the whole feeling of sadness that used to hang over her like a second skin. It was gone, replaced by something colder, something focused. Every night after that day, she'd wait until the others were asleep. She'd rise slowly, barely making a sound, and move to the edge of the quarters. Sometimes I'd wake up and find her crouched by the wall, staring out into the darkness. At first I thought she was praying, but it wasn't prayer, it was planning. She was watching the guards, counting their steps, mapping out the plantation in her mind like a soldier preparing for war. And I knew better than to ask. I stayed quiet. I just watched. I watched her hide scraps of food. I watched her tear strips from old cloth to wrap around her feet. I watched her collect twine, bits of broken glass, anything she could carry, all done with quiet hands and eyes that never blinked long. She never said where she was going or what she meant to do, but I knew something was coming, something big, something that would either set her free or kill her. One night, the moon was high and full. The air was thick, like the sky itself was holding its breath. That's when she came to me. She shook me gently, pressed a finger to her lips, and whispered, "Stay quiet, no matter what happens." Her voice was calm. To calm, I nodded. She kissed my forehead, the first time in years. Then she turned and vanished into the dark. I waited, every muscle in my body tight with fear. Minutes passed, then an hour, then more. I thought she was gone. I thought I'd never see her again. Then I heard the first scream, not from her, from one of the guards. Then shouting, dogs barking. Then fire, real fire. She'd set the barn ablaze. I don't know how she did it, but the flames shot into the sky like a signal. The whole plantation was chaos, slaves running, overseers shouting, whips cracking. Shots fired into the night. The dogs were loose, but confused. Smoke filled the air. In the middle of it all, she ran. I saw her, just a glimpse, her silhouette against the burning sky. She wasn't running like someone who was scared. She was running like someone who had already broken the chains in her mind. Fast, focused, alive. They chased her, all of them. Even the master came out, red in the face, pistol in hand. But the fire slowed them down. It ate the fields, the sheds, the dry wood. Some of the men turned back to save the crops. The others kept running. I followed, careful, staying low. I knew the woods better than they thought I did. I kept to the trees, heart pounding like thunder. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I couldn't let her be alone. I heard more gunshots. I heard dogs howling, then silence. I stopped, crouched in the dark, afraid to breathe. Then I saw her again, barely standing, limping through the underbrush. She had a wound in her side, blood soaked her dress. But she didn't stop. She kept going until she collapsed at the base of a tree. I ran to her, fell to my knees. She looked up at me, smiling through the pain, a real smile, the only one I ever saw. She reached up and touched my face. "You found me," she whispered. "Good boy." Then her eyes closed. I thought she was gone. I shook her, cried, begged, but she was breathing, faint, weak, but alive. I dragged her into a thicket, covered her with leaves, held her through the night. We stayed hidden for 2 days. I kept her warm, fed her the scraps she had saved. On the 3rd night, a group of men passed by, runaways, like us. They were led by a man with a scar across his neck and eyes like a hawk. He looked at me, then at her, and nodded. "You're safe now," he said. They carried her. I walked behind. We traveled for days through mud, rivers, and trees so thick the sun barely touched the ground. They called the place we reached the Ridge. It wasn't a town. It wasn't a camp. It was freedom in the form of hidden fires, secret paths, and faces that didn't flinch when you said your name. My mother was treated like a hero. They cleaned her wounds, fed her, let her rest. And when she finally opened her eyes again, she didn't cry. She looked at the sky, then at me, and she smiled for the second and last time. That escape wasn't just her breaking free from the chains. It was her burning the memory of submission out of her bones. She didn't wait for someone to come save her. She didn't believe in promises or papers. She believed in fire, in action, in blood, if it came to that. And she earned her freedom not with begging, but with a storm. I never forgot that run. I never forgot the smell of smoke, or the way her eyes looked when she turned toward the trees like they were calling her name. That was the night she stopped being someone who cried in the dark. That was the night she became something greater, a fire that couldn't be put out. We stayed hidden in that place they called the Ridge for weeks, maybe months, I can't be sure. Time didn't move the same way out there. There were no bells, no whips, no orders, just wind through the trees and the quiet breathing of people who had survived so much. My mother healed slowly. The wound in her side festered for a while, and some nights I thought I might lose her, but she fought through it, just like she always had. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words came out measured, heavy, like each one had to be earned. There was a woman there, older than my mother, with hands that knew how to close wounds and make teas from crushed rose. She cared for her with quiet devotion, and I never forgot that woman's name, Mama. She said little, but in her silence there was wisdom. She told me my mother was stronger than most. She's been cut and burned and beaten, she said, but her soul never bent. I believed her. My mother would lie under the open sky, eyes half closed, her breath slow and shallow. Sometimes I saw tears slip down her cheeks, not from pain but from remembering. Freedom isn't soft. It doesn't feel like a celebration when all you've ever known is captivity. It's sharp, confusing, sometimes colder than the chains. You escape. She didn't know what to do with it at first. None of us did. One day, she sat up and looked straight at me. "I don't want to hide anymore," she said. Her voice was stronger now. I asked her what she meant. She said she was done running, done surviving just for the sake of it. She wanted to fight. She wanted to help others find where she had found something beyond fear, beyond obedience. And that's what she did. The ridge wasn't just a place to hide. It was a place where people gathered, shared stories, healed, trained, and eventually, they resisted. Small acts, at first sabotaging supply routes, hiding escaped slaves, spreading word of safe trails. My mother became part of that, not with weapons or speeches, but with presence. People listened to her. When she spoke, even the wind seemed to quiet down. She didn't smile much, but when she did, it was the kind of smile that made you believe you could burn down the world and build another. She taught others how to move silently, how to survive off scraps, how to stay hidden in plain sight. She passed down what she had learned the hard way, but she also taught something else: dignity. She told them they were more than what had been done to them, that their blood was still theirs, that their name still mattered, even if the world had forgotten them. I watched her become something different, not just my mother, not just a runaway. She became a guide, a keeper of strength. People began calling her by a name I'd never heard before: Sira. I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was her real name. Maybe it was a new one she chose for herself. She never told me, but it fit. It sounded like stone and storm. One day, a messenger came running through the trees, breathless. A plantation nearby had revolted. Slaves had taken over, burned it down. Some had escaped. Some had died. My mother didn't hesitate. She packed a satchel, tied her hair, and said she had to go help. I begged her not to, told her she'd done enough, but she looked at me like she did when she stood in front of the whip, like her life was never really hers to keep, but something she owed to others still in chains. If I don't go, she said, then what was the point of everything I did? She left at dawn, her step strong again. That was the last time I saw her. Days passed, then weeks. Rumors came in like wine. Some said she had freed dozens before being captured. Others claimed she was shot defending a child. Some whispered she made it out and disappeared into the hills. I never found out the truth. And maybe that's the point. Maybe legends aren't meant to have endings. Maybe they're meant to echo. I waited, I searched, I listened, but her face never came back through the trees. And even now, all these years later, I still wake in the middle of the night, thinking I hear her voice outside the window, calling my name. She never returned, but she never really left, because what she did, who she became, lived on in all of us who saw it, and everyone she touched. Her name, Sira, became something more than a person. It became a story passed from mouth to mouth, a warning to masters, a prayer for the enslaved. Some say she's still out there, helping others, moving like smoke through the forest. Some say she became wind itself. But I know one thing for certain: whatever happened to her, she died free. And that's more than most could ever hope for. If her fire still burns in your chest like it does in mine, don't let her be forgotten. Subscribe to this channel so her story continues to live. And if her name moved you, share this memory. Leave your voice in the comments and let others feel what we just lived. I never thought I'd be the one to run. For years, I followed my mother's steps, learned from her silence, watched her fight her own battles. But when she left, something inside me snapped. I couldn't stay behind in the shadow of chains and whispers anymore. The ridge was no longer safe. Word spread fast, and the master sent more men looking for runaways. They burned what they could find, scared the children and the old. I knew the day was coming when I'd have to choose: stay hidden and wait to be caught, or take the risk and run toward whatever freedom looked like. It wasn't a choice, it was survival. One night, I slipped away from the small fire where we gathered, taking nothing but a worn knife my mother had given me and a handful of dry corn. The forest swallowed me whole. The moon was a thin crescent, barely lighting the path. But I kept moving. Every crack of a branch underfoot sounded like a gunshot. My heart slammed in my chest. I couldn't afford to stop. Hunger gnawed at me, but I forced myself to ignore it. I thought of my mother, her strength, her courage, and it kept me going. The nights were cold, the days colder. I drank from streams and ate berries that made my stomach twist. But I kept moving. I remembered the lessons she taught me: how to read the stars, how to listen for danger, how to hide in plain sight. I was learning to become invisible. I met other runaways along the way, people with haunted eyes and broken spirits. Some joined me, some turned away. We shared stories, hopes, and fears around flickering fires, always ready to scatter at the first sign of danger. There were close calls once. A patrol almost caught us. We hid in a hollow log, holding our breath so long my lungs burned. Another time, a dog found our scent, but I managed to lose it in a swamp. Every step was a battle between fear and hope. But the thought of the quarters, the sound of whips, the tears of those left behind drove me forward. I couldn't let them win. I wanted to live, not to survive. One morning, after days of travel, I stumbled upon a small village. It wasn't much, just a few huts and people who looked tired but free. I was scared to speak, to ask for help, but a woman with kind eyes and warm hands took me in. She gave me food, wrapped my wounds, and listened to my story without judgment. She said I was brave, that I had fire in me, that I belonged somewhere beyond fear. From that village, I heard whispers of a place called the North, where freedom wasn't a dream but a promise. I decided to go. The journey was long and dangerous, but every step was fueled by the memory of my mother and the hope she gave me. I crossed rivers, mountains, and towns where strangers looked at me like I was nothing, but I was something. I was a boy who refused to be broken. I made it. I reached the North, and when I stepped onto that soil, I felt the chains loosen, even if the scars remained. Freedom wasn't perfect. It was lonely. It was hard, but it was mine, and I carried my mother's fire inside me, burning bright. If you feel that fire too, don't let it die here. Subscribe to keep her story alive. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And tell us what freedom means to you, because our voices are the power that no chains can hold down. Freedom hit me like a thunderstorm. It wasn't the calm I expected. No peaceful land flowing with milk and honey. It was chaos, confusion, and a heavy weight on my chest that no one warned me about. After years of chains, running and hiding, suddenly being free felt like standing naked in the storm. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The North was different, but not kind. Folks treated me like an outsider, sometimes worse than the masters did. Some looked at me with suspicion, others with pity. I had no papers, no family, no name that mattered there. I had to learn all over again how to walk, how to speak, how to survive not as a slave, but as a man. I found work where I couldn't. Fields, in factories, in kitchens, anything to keep food on my plate and a roof over my head. The money was barely enough, but it was mine. Every penny was a small victory. At night, I'd sit by the fire, thinking about my mother, wondering if she ever found peace, if she saw the world beyond the chains she broke. I wrote letters, pages and pages, but I never sent them. There was no address, no one to send them to. I held onto her memory like a flame, sometimes warm, sometimes burning. I met others like me, escaped souls searching for the same thing, belonging. We shared stories, scars, hopes. We fought for our place. often against the cold walls of a society that didn't want us. But we survived. We built lies. I learned to read and write by candlelight. Every letter I learned was a silent rebellion. Every book I read was a step away from the past. I dreamed of a future where my story wouldn't end with chains, where my children wouldn't know the taste of fear or loss, but freedom came with its own battles. Racism didn't vanish with the chains. Doors were closed, hands were turned away. Eyes looked through me like I was invisible. I faced hatred, violence, loneliness. I fought for respect in a world that wasn't ready to give it. Sometimes I wanted to give up, to run back to the shadows where at least I knew the rules. But then I'd remember my mother's fire, the way she fought, how she never backed down even when beaten and broken. That fire was mine now. I found strength in the stories of others who refused to be erased, who carved space with their blood and sweat. We started communities, places where our children could learn and grow, where our voices could rise without fear. But the road was long and twisted. Freedom was a promise many tried to steal with lies, with violence, with cold indifference. I buried friends and family who never made it. Their names haunt me. Their struggles remind me what's at stake every day was a battle not just to live, but to be seen as human, to hold on to dignity when the world tried to take it away. But with every sunrise, I found hope. Hope in the children laughing in the streets, in the songs we sang to keep the past alive, in the quiet moments of peace we carved out in a broken world. I learned that freedom wasn't just a place. It was a fight, a state of mind, a commitment to never let the darkness win. And as I stand here, telling you this story, I want you to feel that hope too. Let it light a fire in your heart, because these stories aren't just memories, they are weapons. They are the truth no one can erase. If this story speaks to you, keep it alive, subscribe, and be part of this journey. Share it with those who need to hear it, and tell us how you keep your own fire burning. Together, we carry the light through the darkest nights. Freedom came with a price, one I learned fast and hard. It wasn't just the bruises or the hunger, it was the weight on my soul, the ache in my heart for those left behind. I watched friends disappear, some caught, some killed, others broken beyond repair. Every loss carved a hole inside me. I remember nights lying awake, haunted by screams and silence, wondering if it was all worth it. The masters hunted us like animals. They raged fierce and unforgiving. They sent men with dogs, with guns, with cruel hearts. They burned homes, tore families apart, and still, we fought. We fought because to surrender meant death not always of the body, but of hope, of spirit. I learned that freedom wasn't a place you reach and stay. It was a battle you lived every day. Some days, it felt impossible. The loneliness pressed in, the cold nights bit through my bones. I missed my mother's fire, her fierce strength, that made even the darkest days seem possible. Without her, I was just a boy lost in the storm. But I held on, because giving up meant letting all the pain, all the sacrifice, be for nothing. I found others like me, brothers and sisters bound by scars and dreams. Together, we built fragile communities. We shared what little we had and protected one another. But the cost was always their fear of betrayal, suspicion of strangers, the constant watch for danger. Freedom was a double-edged sword. It gave us room to breathe, but left us exposed. We had to be warriors, even when we were tired. I remember a winter when hunger was so bad we ate roots and bark, when the cold made your fingers numb and your breath froze in the air, when hope felt like a ghost slipping through your fingers. But even then, we kept moving forward. We fought not just for ourselves, but for those who would come after, for children who deserved a life without chains, for mothers who deserved to hold their babies without fear. And I learned that freedom was more than running. It was building. It was loving. It was surviving with dignity. It was telling our stories so the world couldn't forget. I saw the toll on bodies and souls. I saw the grief in eyes that once sparkled with hope. I saw friends who lost themselves to despair, to anger, to silence. But I also saw courage rising again, fierce and unyielding. I saw laughter in children who didn't know chains. I saw hands joined in solidarity, promises made in whispers under starlit skies. Freedom was a cost measured not just in pain, but in the strength to carry on. Every day was a testament to resilience. We faced hatred in places that claimed to be free. We were mocked, beaten, denied work and shelter. Some nights, I slept with one eye open, knowing the danger was never far. But every wound, every scar was a story of survival, of refusal to be erased. I learned to hold my head high, to walk with pride even when the world tried to push me down. I found allies, people who saw us not as shadows, but as brothers and sisters deserving of respect. They taught me that freedom is fragile, but powerful when guarded by many hands. We celebrated the small victories, first steps towards education, the founding of schools, the creation of churches where our voices could rise freely. Those moments were light in the darkness, food for the fire inside us, but the cost remained. We buried too many, we mourned too often, and still, we marched forward. Because to stop meant losing everything. If this story of sacrifice, pain, and courage speaks to you, keep it alive. Subscribe to this channel and walk with us on this path. Share this story and let your voice be heard, because every story, every voice is a light in the darkness. The story I carry in my bones is more than just my own. It belongs to those who came before me and to those who will come after. When I look back at the road I walked, every step is marked with struggle, sacrifice, and a fierce hunger for freedom that never died. I remember my mother's tears, her silent strength, and the fire that pushed her to risk everything. That fire didn't die with her, it passed on to me, to my brothers and sisters, and now, to you listening. Our freedom was bought with blood and pain, with nights spent hiding and days spent fighting to be seen as human. But it was never just about escaping chains. It was about building a life worthy of the sacrifices made, a life where stories like ours aren't whispered in the dark, but shouted from rooftops. We stand on the shoulders of giants, people who dare to dream and fight for tomorrow they might never see. The legacy they left is heavy and beautiful, a reminder that freedom is fragile and must be guarded fiercely. We owe it to them not just to remember, but to carry their fire forward. These stories, this history, are alive. They breathe in the songs we sing, in the names we speak, in the courage we pass down. Forgetting them is like cutting the roots from a tree. Soon, everything falls. And that is why preserving these memories is not just important, it is essential. Every voice that rises to tell these tales is a shield against erasure. Every like, every comment, every share is a battle cry in the fight for truth. So if this story has touched your heart, stand with us. Hit that like button, not just for me, but for the millions who lived, suffered, and dreamed this freedom before us. Leave your thoughts below. Tell us what these stories mean to you, how you keep this fire burning. Your voice matters more than you know. And don't stop here. This story is one of many threads woven together in the fabric of our shared history. We've gathered others just like this in our playlist, stories of courage, pain, resistance, and hope that will move you, change you, and remind you why these memories must live on. The link to the playlist is right there in the description or in the comments below. Dive into them, carry their flames, and keep the legacy alive, because this is not just history. This is who we are. This is our fight. This is our future. Every Time we remember, every time we tell these stories, we resist forgetting. We resist silence. We resist erasure, and that resistance is powerful. It shapes our identity and our strength. It reminds us that the pain endured was not in vain, that the sacrifices made open doors for generations to come. We owe it to the ancestors whose names were never written down, whose faces were never painted, to keep their memory alive by telling their stories loud and clear. This is more than a tale of survival. It is a testament to the human spirit's unbreakable will. It is a call to action, a challenge to each of us to honor the past by building a future where no one suffers under the weight of chains again. So as you watch and listen, remember, you are part of this story now. Your engagement, your voice, your passion keeps this history breathing. When you like this video, you're saying you stand with those who fought and those who still fight. When you comment, you add your voice to a chorus that cannot be silenced. When you share, you send this message out to the world, helping it grow stronger and reach farther. Don't let this flame flicker out. Keep it burning bright, and remember, the journey doesn't end here. Our channel is home to many more stories like this, each one a thread in the vast tapestry of struggle and hope. From the quiet courage of individuals to the roaring power of communities, these stories deserve to be heard, remembered, and passed on. You'll find them all in the playlist linked below in the description or pinned in the comments. Take the time to watch them, to feel their weight, and to carry their fire forward. Because when we remember together, when we stand together, we build a future no chain can break. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for becoming part of a legacy that will never die. Welcome to a story that never ends.